Coming up in this episode of In Clear Focus.
In general, I just think of marketing as rocket fuel. And so if you put it into a rocket, it makes it go faster further. But if you pour it into something that's just like steaming on the launch pad, you have a chance that thing's going to blow up.
You're listening to In Clear Focus, fresh perspectives on marketing and advertising, produced weekly by Big Eye, a strategy-led full-service creative agency growing brands for clients globally. Hello, I'm your host, Adrian Tennant, Big Eye's Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you for joining us. Meetings are the foundation of how we communicate and collaborate. As marketing professionals juggle multiple internal or external client relationships, strategic discussions, and creative sessions across various platforms, the challenge of documenting, organizing, and extracting value from these conversations has never been greater. This has, of course, created a growing need for tools that can help streamline the meeting experience, allowing teams to focus on meaningful engagement rather than administrative tasks. Our guest today is addressing precisely this challenge. Richard White is the founder and CEO of Fathom, a platform that records, transcribes, and summarizes meetings, allowing participants to focus on the conversation rather than taking notes. With a background as a software engineer turned product designer, Richard previously founded UserVoice, one of the leading platforms that technology companies use to manage customer feedback and make strategic product decisions. His entrepreneurial journey also includes working on Kiko, a company in the first batch of Y Combinator. Richard's approach to building technology products that encourage word-of-mouth growth has resulted in remarkable success for Fathom, which has achieved nearly 5,000 reviews on G2 with a perfect 5.0 rating, and was recognized as the #1 highest satisfaction product on G2 last year. To discuss how AI is transforming meeting management and his unique approach to product marketing, I'm delighted that Richard is joining us today from San Francisco. Rich, welcome to In Clear Focus.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we dive into Fathom specifically, I'd love to hear a bit more about your background. I know you started as a software engineer and transitioned to product design. Rich, can you tell us about that journey and how it led you to become a founder?
Sure. Yeah, so I went to school for computer science. I think all growing up, I was working on websites and building little web apps, even like calculator apps, I think, if I want to date myself a little bit here. But yeah, I think I found myself really drawn to not just being able to do kind of the back end of a product, but also to work on the user experience as well. And so kind of early in my career, I was very lucky that I joined a startup in actually the first batch of Y Combinator. And one of the great things about joining startups is you often can do jobs you're not really qualified for. And I was like, I'm an engineer by trade, but I'd love to do design. And they can help me do that. And that was all from there. I'm also very fortunate in that like I grew up with two sets of parents that were both entrepreneurial. And so I think that was kind of the de facto assumption growing up, like, oh yeah, that's just what everyone does. So I remember selling things to kids in first grade and selling like fake Oakleys to students in high school and stuff like that. So I actually had a period after college where I tried to be an employee for 2 years, and I'm so bad at that. I was like, well, I guess I have to be a founder because no one will want to hire me otherwise.
Fathom is your current venture, which you founded in 2020. What inspired you to create an AI-powered meeting assistant?
I think, in early 2020, actually even before the pandemic, just on a lot of Zoom meetings and a lot of back-to-back Zoom meetings. We were actually doing research on a different product. And I remember being on about 15 Zoom meetings a day, back to back, and being on those meetings and just felt very stressed because I'm like trying to capture every important nugget that someone's saying because I'm doing a lot of interesting market research. And so stressing out, trying to type notes while I talk to people and spend a lot of time cleaning up those notes after the meeting. And then I'd look at them 2 weeks later and be like, I don't exactly remember which meeting this was, right? And more problematically, I would do all these calls, write all these notes in service of coming back to my team with some insights. And I just found that so much was lost in translation. I'd have some really great conversations. I get some really big emotional reactions to things, positively, negatively. And then all of that just turned into 6 bullet points on a slide and the team kind of shrugging their shoulders, right? And so I was like, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? We've got to have tech that allows us to solve this now because no one likes taking notes and no one really likes reading other people's notes. They don't really do a great job of conveying what will actually happen in those meetings.
Well, I learned when we were preparing for this episode that when starting Fathom, you had 3 core hypotheses. Number 1, AI would improve significantly. Number 2, transcription costs would drop to near zero. And your third hypothesis was that the video conferencing market would remain fragmented. So here we are. How have these predictions worked out for you, and how has it shaped your product development?
Yeah, I mean, they've all worked out, which has been great, right? Not only have they worked out at just the right time, right? I think sometimes you can be directionally correct and you get the timing wrong because the timing is the hardest part to get right. And so, for example, when we did get started, transcription costs was about $3 an hour, and now it's about a couple cents an hour. And if that transition had taken 2 years longer to happen, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So, yeah, I think there's a big difference, especially as like a second-time founder, between what I've done with Fathom and what I did with my previous companies. And one of the biggest differences is this, what I call it being like hypothesis driven from the start. And so having these hypotheses allowed us to say, gosh, okay, we know AI doesn't exist in 2020, or at least it's not any good. In fact, I remember our investors early on got really panicked when I started calling us an AI company in 2020. It's hard to remember now, but the first wave of quote unquote AI companies were pretty lackluster, right? And so they're like, you don't want to get thrown in with that. We're like, no, this is where we think it's going. And so we kind of had this vision that we'd be the first people to like make an AI note taker that everyone can use for free, but that we would build all the other stuff first. We would go build the recording infrastructure and the user experience and the desktop app and go build distribution channels and all those sorts of things with this belief that at some point in the future, AI will hit this like threshold and it'll actually be able to take the notes for us, because until then, we're just a really good transcription tool. And then we'll basically, when AI shows up, we'll get to kind of drop it in. We'll basically have like built the whole car except like the engine, right? We'll put like a crappy like lawnmower engine in there. At some point, someone's going to invent a V8. We're going to drop that in there, and it's really going to take it from being a kit car to something we can take to the track. And that's exactly what happened. And so it's fun to see. I actually have Fathom recordings from 2020 where we like laid out this vision for how we thought this was going to play out. And it's fun to see that it actually did.
Well, one thing that sets Fathom apart is that it works across multiple platforms, including Microsoft Teams, Zoom, of course, and Google Meet. Why was cross-platform compatibility so important to your vision?
I think this is actually one thing we learned along the way. We actually started off being exclusively for Zoom. And then as we saw users sign up and we had access to anonymized calendar data, we could see that, gosh, there's a lot of folks that are cross-platform themselves, right? They'll do a Zoom meeting in the morning. They'll do a Google Meet in the afternoon. Next week, some client of theirs will put them on a Teams call. And so you kind of exist in this world where it reminds me of like, Neapolitan ice cream. Like some people are on chocolate, some people are vanilla, some people on strawberry, and none of those 3 flavors are going away. And so if you want to have a solution that allows them, that takes notes on 100% of their meetings, you got to be on all of these platforms because everyone else is. And I think there's also, no one's going to spend their social capital to say, no, I don't want to meet with you on Microsoft Teams. You need to meet on Google Meet. Like you just click whatever links on your calendar. And so for that reason, we found it was super important to be able to support all those platforms.
You mentioned to me that you've taken a pretty unconventional approach to marketing Fathom. I think your exact quote was ripping up the playbook when it comes to traditional strategies. Rich, can you elaborate on your approach and why you chose this path?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's always a tendency to try to do everything marketing wise and do all the channels. And I remember early on, we're not doing content. We're not doing social. We said no to basically every kind of marketing angle or channel you could do because we had such strong conviction in one channel. And that channel was word of mouth. We said, gosh, this is a product where if you're using it, you're going to bring it into your meetings. You have to explain to other people why you're recording and why you have this bot that's taking notes for you. And those people are going to naturally ask questions and maybe even want to access those notes themselves. Like you don't really get that in most B2B software, right? Most times it's you use it and no one knows you're using it sort of thing. And so we thought, gosh, if we combine this with being free, that's, we think, a really winning combination for kind of a very organic viral adoption of your product. And so we said, gosh, we're going to invest just everything in that. We're not going to spend anything on marketing. In fact, we just hired our first marketing people a few months ago, and we're almost 5 years into this thing. So, and again, it's worked out. Like we put a lot of effort into customer delight and experience and great customer support. And you combine that with a product that's great, but also free and is in your meetings. And so it's really taken off.
Well, today, I understand that about 70% of your signups do come from word of mouth referrals. What specific strategies have you implemented to encourage this viral growth?
I think, I think in some ways the strategy really was make sure we delight customers at every turn. And Think about, we will send them things like if we notice an issue before they do, we'll send them an outreach email. We will send them swag. We've let users invest in the company. We invested really early in having really good customer support, which most free products don't. Yeah, so I think even early on, we used to pay customers just to give us their feedback in their first meeting with Fathom. And so we just were very customer obsessed about like, this, it's not sufficient for you just to like Fathom. We want you after your first experience or two to be like, to love the product, to be like blown away. And that's one of the nice parts of AI, right? AI feels magical. So that's at least a tailwind on our back, but we want you to feel blown away because I think that's the only way you get true word of mouth. You don't get word of mouth from product people like, right? Ask you products they absolutely love and find transformational. And I knew this product was transformational for how I worked. I was confident it would be transformational for other people. I just want to make sure we had everything else around that. So great support, great service, great outreach, and great community engagement.
Well, as you mentioned, you've only recently hired your first VP of marketing after, what was it, almost 5 years in business. And I think you've raised something like $25 million. What made this the right time to incorporate more traditional marketing experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think marketing is super important. I think, as you said, though, in the beginning, I think you really only need one channel. And then at some point, you get to this point, like, okay, like now we're big enough that we should add in other channels. Maybe they won't become the majority. They won't maybe eclipse that 70% we're getting from organic. But if they can add another 10%, that's super valuable once the machine is kind of up and running and working. But in general, I just think of marketing as rocket fuel. And so if you put it into a rocket, it makes it go faster, further. But if you pour it into something that's just like steaming on the launch pad, you have a chance that thing's going to blow up. And so I think I've seen examples where people pour a lot of money into marketing pre-product market fit. And in some ways, it sometimes makes things worse because now you're burning a ton of money when you really haven't solved the core thing. We worked on Fathom for a year, and at the end of the first year, we only had 50 active users. And that still, though, was good enough for me, right? Like I was like, oh, cool, that's the milestone. We didn't need 5,000. I need 50 people that use it day in, day out. And so I think a lot of people jump to user acquisition way too early instead of spending a lot longer time just with a small group of people and iterating your product till it is something that is lovable and referable and something people want to tell their friends about.
That's a very counterintuitive approach. I think most founders just want to reach as many people as they can as quickly as they can, right? And then figure it out once they've got active subscribers.
Yeah, I think that's true. The other thing is I think people try to do a lot of things at once. They try to figure out acquisition and is it a sticky product and how much are you going to pay for it? And I think that's hard. Like we did that one step at a time. We actually didn't even charge anyone until 2.5, 3 years in because we just want to stay really focused on building a great core experience first.
That's great. Well, let's talk about your business model. Fathom today offers a free version for individual users. Rich, what was the thinking behind this strategy and how does it support your ultimate growth and monetization goals?
Yeah, I think the other nice thing that got me really excited about this company when we were starting it was this business model where there really are two people that care about the meetings you're in, right? One is you, the person on there is supposed to take notes, remember how this thing works. But there's another part where your manager is probably interested in like, you know, if you're in sales, customer conversations you're having or prospect conversations, same thing for customer success. Even if you're in engineering, maybe your internal kind of like stand-ups and stuff like that, people are interested in. So there's this nice model where we knew eventually there was a manager use case. And we saw this with some existing kind of incumbent solutions, specifically ones for sales, where there was a value of this product to the manager to help them understand what's happening without having to sit in a bunch of meetings. And we said, gosh, that's the person that's going to pull out the credit card one day. So we don't need to actually charge the individual that's trying to take notes. All we want from that individual is to use the product, love it. And by using the product, they kind of spread it in their org to other companies. And so it made this really clean business model in my mind where we keep a separation of church and state, if you will. And at one side, it's all about customer love and we give you amazing product for free and you're going to tell your friends. And on the other side, great, once we know we get a certain kind of groundswell of usage at your company, there's going to be a natural kind of movement to, hey, I want to standardize my use of Fathom across my sales team, my CS team, my marketing team. And that's the point where it's like, great, company can pull out its company credit card instead of you pulling out your personal credit card. And so I think that's worked really well. And I mean, in the beginning, it almost worked too well because we had all these people saying like, how can this possibly be free? Because I think over the last 10 years, there's a lot of companies that said things were free and they found all sorts of tricky ways to get you to upgrade, or it really wasn't. They were selling your data. And so if you go to our website, we actually have this whole little pop-up. It's like, how is this free? And like, it actually explains our business model, people, because I think people were so kind of incredulous that it's too good to be true sort of thing. But it works and it's been great.
Mm-hmm. Well, for marketing leaders looking to implement AI tools into their workflow, what key considerations should they keep in mind when evaluating solutions like Fathom?
I think the hardest thing about both building and evaluating products in the AI age is it's so easy to get the AI to say something. It's really hard to get to say the quote unquote right thing. And we have a whole team that spends a lot of time testing subtle variations in like LLM models we use, the prompts we use to generate them, the pipeline we use to generate output. And so I think when we see people do bake-offs between us and other tools, or just when we are evaluating AI tools, we have to spend a lot of time not just like, does the thing work? We're used to software. It's okay. Something showed up on my screen. Great. It must be working. No. Now we have to spend a lot of time actually evaluating the quality of the output of these tools. And so I think that's something we've invested a lot in, but I also think it's something not a lot of companies have that DNA. A lot of companies, especially more incumbents, they're just like, oh, we got an AI product. We ship this AI feature. And they tend to be very lackluster because they don't have this DNA to rigorously test this and find out like, oh yeah, that output is technically right, but it's too verbose. That output's too concise. Right? It's concise, but it's not accurate enough. And so it's weird. It's become kind of this art form. And I think the smaller startups tend to do a little better at it than folks like ourselves who really invest a lot in it. So my number one thing would be like, test the output of these things, not just it spits something out, because it's really easy to get to spit something out, really hard to get it to spit out the right things.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after this message.
Hi, I'm Kate Hardcastle, the author of The Science of Shopping, How Psychology and Innovation Creates a Winning Retail Strategy, published by Kogan Page. Drawing on nearly 30 years' experience working with brands such as Disney, Marks & Spencer, and American Express, I reveal how emotions, perceptions, and social factors influence consumer behavior in our evolving retail landscape. This book provides practical insights into everything from the psychology of pricing to creating immersive retail experiences that resonate with customers. You'll discover real-world examples from leading companies and learn how to blend the physical and digital elements to create memorable, value-driven shopping experiences. As an In Clear Focus listener, you can save 25% on The Science of Shopping when you order directly from copenpage.com. Just enter the exclusive promo code BIGI25 at checkout. Shipping is always complimentary for customers in the US and the UK. I really hope my book will help you to understand what motivates us as shoppers and how to develop effective retail strategies.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Richard White, founder and CEO of Fathom, an AI-powered meeting assistant that works across multiple video conferencing platforms. Well, for our audience of brand marketers and advertising professionals, could you walk us through some specific use cases that demonstrate how they might benefit from using Fathom in their day-to-day work?
So there's probably two angles to this, right? One is I think anyone who's on a bunch of meetings, and everyone you just mentioned is that, right? Benefits, I think, from having Fathom. It's kind of a second brain. You don't feel like to be switched on the entire time. You can always refer back to things. I think also, especially if you're meeting with customers or prospects, or you're doing any kind of that kind of research, super valuable because you can then show other people in your org kind of your supporting evidence, if you will. But where I think I see the most value for folks like that is when you do have a team workspace set up, and you can then kind of mine all the conversations that are happening across your sales team, across your customer success team, across your support team. We see a couple different things. One is you can start setting up alerts where you can start hearing about, oh, hey, anytime competitors get mentioned by a prospect, I want to hear that conversation. You can start taking some of the relevant transcripts out of Fathom, putting them into an LLM, maybe Notebook LLM, and using that to kind of hone your messaging. I've also seen folks use it in totally different angle. Like we take a lot of my meetings, all hands, sometimes shows like this, and we plug that into LLM and we get out like, oh, interesting LinkedIn content that we could come up with, right? We're like mining our all hands and just internal meetings for that. So there's I think a lot of different ways you can use this once you realize like, oh, I can now have almost omnipotent access to customer conversations at my company.
Rich, with so many AI note-taking tools now available, including those built into the video conferencing platforms themselves, how does Fathom differentiate itself and stay ahead of the competition?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we always knew that once our hypotheses became true, AI was good, and transcription was free, there was going to be a lot of folks entering the space, right? And so that's why it was important for us to get ahead of that so we could build what we think is the most reliable and robust way to like basically record these meetings, transcribe them. But also, again, like I said, we spend a lot of effort into testing summaries and making sure the notes you get out of Fathom are better than any other system out there. So I think when you combine kind of like best in class output with the most like robust free version out there, right? Majority of our users are on free, and we're totally happy with that. And then you combine that with being cross-platform, which again, I think most of us are cross-platform in our daily lives. So we find that those three things are a pretty winning combination.
Got it. Rich, how has being a fully remote company influenced your product development and company culture?
Yeah, I did a remote company 10, 15 years ago before it was cool. And then my last company, we had 2 offices, and I spent most of my life flying between those 2 offices. And so when we started Fathom, we started during the pandemic. So we kind of were like, it was default remote at that point, but we always really intended to be a remote company. In terms of culture, I think we value actually work-life integration as opposed to like separation, right? We don't want you to just like come to the office and then like that show Severance. I actually haven't watched it, but leave your brain behind at work during the day, right? I think one of the advantages startups have is you get really smart people, really senior folks. You remove their commute time and you let them kind of anytime pop back in, and when they have an idea, commit it to the code base. I think that's super, super valuable. And obviously, given what we're doing, right? We're building tools for video conferencing meetings, helps that we're remote, right? Because every meeting we have is that. And so we really get to kind of dog food our own product pretty well. There are some challenges to it. I think in this day and age, actually, the biggest benefit is that so few companies are committed to being fully remote. And through the pandemic, a lot of great talent got exposure to working remotely and loved it. They loved not having that commute. They loved being able to move to a venue with an area with a lower cost of living. And now you've seen these big companies really struggle with how to manage this, because I do think remote gets much harder at scale. Right? We're about 75 people today. But I think in this phase we're at, it's a huge advantage in the talent market, really more than anything, because we can say you don't need to leave. You don't need to move back to some major city that's really expensive. You don't need to commute an hour through traffic every day. And there's just so much efficiency gains to be had from that. And there's a lot of great people now that, again, got a taste of that and want more in an era where everyone's swinging back to RTO. So
You've referenced your previous ventures a couple of times. I'm curious, based on your experience with both User Voice and now Fathom, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are developing products for the B2B space, but want to achieve the kind of organic growth typically associated with consumer products?
I mean, this is where I think it's helpful to, again, have some hypotheses early on. So you're building to where the world is going, not where it is today. And I think especially around marketing channels, I think a lot of founders look at the big companies they want to become and they see them doing everything. They're doing social, they're doing content, they're doing SEM, SEO, right? GEO, they're doing all the things, they're doing the events, blah, blah. And not realizing that, like I said, one, you don't need that many people to get started, right? You don't need to immediately figure out how you're going to get to 10 million. You should have a hypothesis about like how you're going to get there, but you really should know, like, great, take it one step at a time. I need to find 50 people that love this product and use it day in, day out, or week in, week out. Great. Once I get that, now I need to find 500 people. Great. Now I need to get to 5,000. And each step you're going to need a probably different marketing channel. And so I think you should have a hypothesis around how you're going to get to each step. You don't want to be flat-footed, and you don't want an answer where the answer is, oh, we're going to do a mix of 5 of these things, right? Like it has to be, it's not a multi-select, it's a single select, right? And so I think if you can answer a question credibly around how you're going to get from, honestly, with 50 users, you should just get that through your network, right? You're going to hustle, you're going to whatever to get those. But like 50 to 500, like how are you going to do it? Oh, you probably do some cold outbounds. All right, 500, 5,000. Okay, now you're going to probably need some inbound channel or something scalable. But I think you just need to know, pick one channel. All the great companies generally start with one, and then know that that's going to change each one of these kind of step levels, step function jumps in users. But don't feel like you're not going to become a billion user company overnight. So take it one step at a time.
You've mentioned building superfans rather than just users. How do you cultivate this sort of deeper level of engagement?
One is trying to involve the folks. I actually hate the word users, right? So it's like I try to avoid the people that use our product as much as possible. Like I said, I think doing things that build these feedback loops with them, I think is super important, right? So we do some in-app surveys, and if you give us a really high score, you actually get an outreach from me, right? Thanking you, and blah, blah. If you get a really low score, you get an outreach from someone on my team that wants to pay you $20 to get on a call and walk us through where we went wrong, sort of thing. And so I think more than anything, it's probably a cultural thing, just like at the outset setting it up. Our bar is 10 out of 10. Our bar is customer love. Our bar is not, this is fine, it's good enough. And then making sure that's reflected in all of who you hire, how you do things like customer support. But then I think the key thing is like building in, and you don't have to have a ton of them, but building in enough of these kind of like feedback loops where you're giving users a chance to reach out to you. That's very natural, or you're hitting them at the right moments, right? Oh, you just finished your first call with Fathom. We'll pay you $50 to tell us how it went, right? I mentioned that one, right? Or you, like I said, you didn't love your first experience. Great. Like, let's jump on a call and explain that too. So I think just getting in the rhythm of doing that regularly is so helpful.
Well, looking ahead, Rich, how do you see AI-powered meeting tools evolving? And what's next for Fathom?
Yeah, what's really excited about, it feels like we're definitely surfing on the wave, right? And as I mentioned with our hypotheses, we're out in the water well before the wave kind of showed up, and now it's kind of fun to be riding it. And what's cool is that like every 6 to 9 months, these things are improving so much, it unlocks a whole new set of features we can build. So really about a year and a half ago was when you really get to the point where the AI can write better notes on an individual meeting than you can, right? It's kind of like GPT-4, Claude 2. Now we're at a place where what we're able to do is we now have like an AI that watched your meeting can answer any question about it. So you can just like, oh, do we talk about salary in this recruiting conversation? Or what were the top 3 things? You can interrogate almost the meeting itself, right? And it does a really good job. That's a feature we have called Ask Fathom. And now what's next is we're starting to be able to do both of those things now for a much larger set of meetings. We've had 30 meetings with this customer. What's a high level summary of what we've discussed? And give me that kind of AI interface where I can interrogate it too about, was there any features that came up? Did we offer them discounts? And it's not just looking at one meeting, it's looking at hours of meetings. And I think we're seeing that expand now where we can even ask this across your entire kind of meeting space. So we're prototyping some stuff now in beta where the AI understands emotion, it understands intent. And I can just say things like, hey, anytime someone had like a really negative reaction to pricing, can you just send me that, put that clip in my inbox or put it in the Slack channel? Anytime there's a product blocker, right, in a sales call, let's know about that too. There's a heated debate between my engineers on an engineering stand-up. I want to know about that. So that's one side of what's coming. The other side is like expanding that Chat GPT for your meetings even further. We did a prototype the other day where we asked Fathom, hey, tell me the history of transcription engines at Fathom. And it went through 4 years of meetings, all hands engineering meetings, and it wrote me like a 5-page document about here's exactly everything we've done and how it worked. And when you think about how challenging it is to document things in a company, and knowledge management is a whole space unto itself, this idea that we'll just be able to have meetings and have great discussions, and we don't have post-meeting work, we don't have to write notes anymore, we don't have to document our action items, we don't have to fill in our CRM, we don't have to update our Asana. All this stuff gets done for us. And oh, by the way, now we get like this like omnipotent knowledge management tool for free just by, again, having conversations with our colleagues. I think it's going to be mind-blowing. And I think it's going to change meetings from something we all kind of loathe to something that's like, no, they're great again because we got rid of all the work we don't like. We don't like all the extra work. And we don't like the fact that all this great stuff happens and gets lost in the ether afterwards. The future here is like, you're just going to speak stuff into existence in your meetings. And you're also going to be aware of meetings you weren't even in. You're going to have unprecedented level of basically like knowledge across your organization, which I think is really exciting because that's the problem with meetings. Like they're the primary way we disseminate knowledge in organizations, but they historically only worked if everyone was in attendance. And so it was really fragmented. Now, great. Tim from marketing doesn't have to be on any of these meetings to know the things he needs to know about stuff that's relevant to his projects, right? And so anyways, that world gets me, as you can tell, super excited.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to meet somebody who's excited about meetings, but that's what this podcast is about. Great conversation. Rich, if listeners are interested in trying Fathom, what's the best way to get started?
Yeah, just go to fathom.video and you'll click the sign up button. You can be set up. And honestly, if you got a meeting coming in 5 minutes, you can have it ready for then. So it's a pretty quick setup process. So yeah, check it out and let me know what you think. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Rich, thank you very much for being my guest this week on In Clear Focus.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to my guest this week, Richard White, founder and CEO of Fathom. As always, you'll find a complete transcript of our conversation with timestamps and links to the resources we discussed on the In Clear Focus page at bigiagency.com. Just select Insights from the menu. Thank you for listening to In Clear Focus, produced by Big Eye. I've been your host, Adrian Tennant. Until next week, goodbye.